My face currently feels like I've been run through by Tom Stewart.
Puts it to the top of the square. Oh, beautiful little fist in there by Dale. Crucial centimetre moments.
He definitely has a bit of the Belcho spirit. As I have a bit of the Belcho spirit.
Hello and welcome back to The Back Pocket, the podcast that is languishing at the bottom of the ladder 0-2 after being ruined by the left foot of an 18-year-old boy.
We're not worried about it.
Not worried about it.
Not worried about
Nothing
it.
to worry about, because we are in a better position than Hawthorn. I think we're older than their list by a stretch, on average. Which I don't like thinking about. Your hosts, as always, are me, Jack, and I'm joined by Alastair, who's off to a great start as a coach at his new club.
No, wrong Alastair.
He's kicking. He's going well. We're doing it. Let's go.
The average age of Hawthorn's list this year is 23. 23.1.
That's
18th by a way.
Yeah,
Adelaide and Essendon are about to hit 24 on average.
I don't know how I feel about that. That's very young.
Yeah.
For a podcast about defenders, it was a pretty big week for key forwards this week. 13 key
truly.
forwards kicked 3 or more goals, 14 if you count Majocek, who really does play as one at Collingwood. Not great, lots of bags, high scores, unless you count the Freo North game, which was not high scoring.
Larky still kicked.
Yeah, Larky still kicked a bag again,
Yeah.
leading the Coleman, LDU probably leading the Brownlow.
She's
North
leading the Rising Star.
North in the top 8. A lot going on.
Strange,
they got
yeah.
Hawthorn this week, so probably another win notched in. That's 3 from 3. That's more wins than they had last year.
It's a good storyline, isn't it? Round 3. Hawthorn can't win. North undefeated. Coach and ex-player going
Clarko
against
doing
each other.
goofy holding the ball airplanes on the boundary line.
It'll be
Caro
interesting.
having a mare about it. Footy classified.
Yeah. Look, I get it. In a way, like, he is putting on a performance to try and build a camaraderie at that club, which is the right thing to do because they have been through coach
Trying
after
to buy
coach.
into the youth and the excitement, whatever.
However, it is goofy.
If
You
they
can't-
lost,
You can't deny the fact that it's goofy.
which they very nearly did, that would have been replayed for the other reasons of
Yeah.
looking really stupid.
Not that I think it's wrong for him to do it. I just think we have to understand that it's very silly, and you don't see any other coach doing that. Even Craig McRae, who is,
definitely buying into the youth of his club.
he's
for
not
sure.
on the boundary line 2 meters away from a player dropping an airplane. So I don't know. It's a non-issue really.
Maybe he should be. Maybe they would have won the flag last year if he was.
I'm not concerned about it. So
That was the only game as well, to my high scores. The only game this week that the winning team didn't knock 90 points was that
Really?
North game. Every other game, the winning team was 90 or 100 or more.
well, the AFL are going to love that.
Highest banging home crowds.
Mhm.
Following up that, the 2 highest opening rounds of a season with a derby, a showdown, and Collingwood versus Richmond at the MCG. So
Shame about all the racism. though.
probably just a bit of that going around.
Shouldn't laugh.
But
No.
Collingwood supports the voice to Parliament, which seems like a relevant thing for a football club to
I think
be
it's
talking about.
good of them to be putting their name in, considering the issues they've had with racism.
Yes.
They should be doing everything they can to advocate
Yeah.
and be better. So I have no problem with them talking about it. We're all going to move on from it as soon as the game starts. So who really cares what they say during the week?
Alright, so shall we roll into, though you're not very excited about it, votes for the week?
Yeah, look, I'm not happy about the votes this week because I feel like maybe I'm just being really harsh this year. I was last week as well.
Last week, yeah, you were.
I don't think there's been too many great
There haven't been
defenders
brilliant
this week.
games.
No.
I
I've got a slew of honourable mentions, but again, they are more...
don't even have a huge amount of honourable mentions, but I have got 5 votes that I've settled on.
Yeah, I've made my decision. So I'll
After
start.
last week, we talked about there were so many defenders who played really good games. There were people who you bagged out last week for letting goals get kicked on them that would have absolutely got 3 or 4 votes this week,
Yeah.
playing the same game. So, harsh, but yeah, I'll let you go if you want to roll with your number
I'll
one.
start with number one. My one is going to your favourite, Brandon Zerk-Thatcher.
Okay,
He's
yeah,
one vote
he was
from me.
definitely in my honourable mentions. Had a good game.
Yeah, I think it was probably one of his best. He had a couple of really good ones towards the end of last season. Stats-wise, not huge, but I think he's becoming a bit of a rock, and I'm glad to see him be a mainstay in that defence now.
I think he might have got 1 or 2 coaches' votes as well for his performance.
I think he did.
I'm not
Low end.
Yeah, not locked in on that, but yeah, definitely played a good game. And like you say, just a really good defensive game. Just really just played a role, sat in there,
Lockdown.
and they ran home with that game in the last quarter, which was a shame for Gold Coast because they really needed to win that. But good for Essendon.
I think he's done his ankle at the end of the game too. So probably played his best game for the club
Rough.
and injured himself. So he'll be out next week. So probably no votes for a couple of weeks for Big Head T. So we'll see.
All right. Well, my one vote was to podcast favourite Sam Collins.
Okay.
I'm
just going to roll along because Sam Collins is my 2
Is
votes.
you 2? Perfect. Yeah, had his 7 contested defensive one-on-ones, only lost one of them.
Yep.
10 spoils, 11 marks. 5 of those marks were intercepts, 3 contested.
Yep.
6 pressure acts as well for a big man is huge. Laid 4 tackles, and he is a monster of a man. So that's...
More importantly, watching that game, even though I didn't want to, he was pointing, generaling, controlling the back line, which is something
He's
that's...
vice-captain there, I think.
Yeah. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think he's this. I think they've got co-captains and a sole vice-captain. But he's very much a leader at that club. We saw it last year. I think he's really important to their future. I wish he could have told Ballard not to elbow someone in the back of the head. But it's okay.
I wish he didn't give
only
away
got a fine. So
4 goals or 5 goals to Langford playing on him. So
incredible. But he only got a fine, so it really wasn't a problem. We're all good. But either way, I thought he played a really good game. And hopefully, carries that on because he got pretty much a bit of a bath against Sydney. Although the ball went inside 50 that many times that I reckon most blokes would have got a bath.
I think Sydney early on in the year have shown that whoever they're playing is going to be challenged. Whether they keep that up the whole year, who knows? But I can't really pants him too much for last week.
Yeah, definitely some fire in the blood. So no pun intended, but at Sydney, they're just playing with an absolute ferocious passion.
Yes.
Until about 10 minutes to go against Hawthorn, it looked like they weren't just going to stop.
Yeah.
Worried about whoever comes in their path. And this week it's Melbourne with no Gawn or May. So,
it could be bad, but they'll want to bounce back from last week as well. I think they'll spend a lot of this week working on that connection with Grundy. If it pays off, we don't know, but we'll see.
Yeah, no, absolutely. All right.
So your 2 again.
My 2 again. My 2 was, I didn't get him in last week. I did this week. Mason Redman.
Okay.
Played another really good game. 22 touches this week. 7 marks, 5 intercepts, 12 pressure acts, all in the defensive half. And this week kicked a point, so doesn't get the deduction for scoring a goal.
Mason Redman kicked 2 goals.
That was last week, wasn't it? Kicked a point this week.
Oh, I don't know. Maybe
Anyway,
I'm mixing them up.
Once again, thought he was good. He's become a real role player. He's one of the most important players and one of the best players in that team.
He did kick 2 goals last week. That's my bad.
I really enjoyed his game. So that's my 2.
I didn't find room for Mason Redman. Spoilers. He's in my honourable mentions. I had to choose between him and Zerk-Thatcher for my 1.
Understand that because I had it the other way around.
Yeah, I made that decision. So onto my 3. I don't think this is too controversial. Harris Andrews for
my
3
as well.
Sweet, that works.
I had him on honourable mentions last week. Said that had they not got belted, probably would have been in there.
Yeah.
He played as a captain. I thought this week. I thought he really led.
I think he did
team.
what Lever did last week for Melbourne, but better.
High pressure acts, high intercepts, took 10 marks, kicked the ball really well. When he was taking that ball out of that back line, his disposal was brilliant. And once again, like you say, like the Collins game, you could see him instructing the younger players around him and where to be.
Yep.
Had the lights not gone out in that game, which was one of the most bizarre moments I've seen, because Fox cut out for us about 3 times during that game.
Yeah.
I thought it was just that again. But then I realised that there was still movement on the screen, and it was just the fact that the lights had gone out. Had the lights not gone out, they would have won by 30, 40 points.
Yeah. Just on Brisbane quickly, I'm going to throw my honourable mention in here because it's relevant. I think Jack Payne played a really good support role to Andrews. He had, I think, 9 or 10 1%ers in that game.
I was really worried when he got kicked in the hand and went off because I thought they might be in trouble without him. But
I think those two are making a really good combo, especially with Marcus Adams potentially not coming back to the game.
It was really sad to hear him talked about this week. I heard them talking to Fagan. I think it was either halftime or after the game. They asked about Adams. I think see him this year, and he said, "Look, I don't think we'll ever see him on a football field again." He said, "We're not worried about him playing football. We just want him to be well."
Yeah.
And the way that Fagan just moved immediately into playing football is not always great. Like the positivity of that is just gone.
Yeah.
So hopefully Adams is all right. And it's such a strange thing to have this week where people are still talking about the bump being dead and football being soft when something like Adams is happening the same week as that. Someone who's one of the most beloved footballers in the country.
And we had obviously the double sling tackles. So it's very interesting that we've had 3 or 4 tribunal cases already within 2 weeks.
Concussion related, suspensions.
Except for TDK, which was a write-in, which I didn't even know you could do.
It was weird. But yeah, I also think that the bump is dead discussion each year is really funny because it's like John Farnham. Like every year, like bump is dead,
tour.
And then the next year,
his farewell tour.
The next year, or 6 months later, the same year, the bump's dead again because it hasn't died. People are still doing it. Same as Goodwin telling his players not to do it every March.
And then forgetting about it.
I don't understand it. Like there is still room for a bump. It's just that if you elect to bump and you take the head, that's the risk you've taken. So probably don't bump. Like
simple as that.
Pretty easy. Anyway,
that's
rolling
got nothing
into
to do with Andrews.
4 votes.
I'm going to give my 4 to Jack Sinclair.
Jack Sinclair? Okay, well, I'll skip ahead. He was my 5 votes.
Okay, yep. The only reason I didn't give him 5 is he had 10 pressure acts, which is great, but only 2 tackles.
Yeah.
I know that's not his game, but step it up.
I did I did notice that I had his pressure acts down, and I was like, do I write down 2 tackles? I'm not sure if they're even worth writing down.
I put it in brackets.
But 33 touches at 88.
Yeah.
9 contested disposals as well, which is, combined with those pressure acts, played a really hard game. It felt like he was just everywhere watching that game.
I think the good thing about Jack Sinclair last year is he was one of the few St Kilda players when you watch, you went, he's trying his heart out. Him and Steele, obviously. And it was great to watch them. And now every player in that team is playing with the same speed and intensity as Sinclair.
Steele...
except they're not as good as him, so it makes him look better.
I cannot fathom playing with a broken collarbone, let alone picking up 5 or 6 disposals and a tackle after coming back onto the field. We knew he was tough as nails, but that just confirmed that he is nuts. Their injury list now could just about beat their listed team.
Yeah.
If you topped up with another 8 VFL players. You've got Membry, Steele, Billings, King, Caulfield, your favourite to forget, McKenzie, Zach Jones, Jack Hayes, and then a few people who were almost in the side in Allison, Houghton, Keeler, and McLennan, and then Bytel and Webster on the short-term injury list.
The weird thing is how many of those are just indefinite injuries.
Yeah, and
there's like 6 or 7 we won't see for the whole season.
I understand why people thought they were going to start so poorly because of that list. Like that's a Membry and Membry, King, and Hayes together was enough for me to go, well, how are they going to score?
Yeah.
For starters.
Turns out, kids.
Doesn't matter. You just bring in some 18 and 20-year-olds and you're fine. So they're doing really well against all of my expectations.
And a lot of that is still helped by Jack Sinclair continuing his form from last year.
Yeah, and with Steele out, it's going to be interesting to see whether they can, because he was just a bull all game again, whether they can continue that same ferocity around the ball.
We shall see. Brad Crouch also played a great game, so I think there's an infectious energy there at the moment, which could see them in good stead against Essendon. But I could also say the same thing about Essendon. So
yeah, Essendon look like they're playing a more exciting brand of football.
They look like they're having fun for the first time in 2 years.
Absolutely. Well, I might do my 5 because we'll swap that around, and then you can do your. My 4. Sorry,
I can't imagine.
You can do your 5.
I can't imagine it's different. Surely.
My 4 is Aiden Core.
Okay. Mine is different.
So it'll be interesting to see who your 5 is. Is it? I won't jump ahead and spoil it, but I have a feeling it might be.
Yeah.
Aiden Core played the game that he was so close to playing so many times last year. He didn't lose a single contested 1-on-1 out of 6 he had. He had 22 touches, 6 intercepts, 5 contested, 6 spoils, 10 marks, 10 pressure acts, and 3 tackles at fullback.
That's what you want.
And that's marshalling that backline too, because they've dropped like flies with retirement and injury. I think that's the best game I've ever seen him play. And he played some really good ones last year in shocking losses, but Freo were pumping that ball in there over and over again in that last term, and that backline held up really well. I think there's a lot of issues for Freo involved in that, as much as there are credit to North Melbourne, but I thought he led that backline superbly.
I think he's definitely being helped out with the addition of Logue. Logue's been close to their best player, obviously.
Yeah, he's been really good.
Not including the three we mentioned earlier in the podcast, but I think Logue has been important to that back line. And if you get Logue, Mackay and Core together, that's a pretty good trade.
Yeah, especially, and Sheasel played a lot of really good. We can criticise Dacos for it last year. I still think Sheasel played more of a wing role, but he also spent a lot of time in the defensive half last week, playing some proper defensive stuff. I think he had 16 or something pressure acts too. So credit where it's due, or 26 pressure acts and 16 defensive half pressure acts. The kid was just everywhere.
Yeah, 23 pressure acts in total, it says here. So.
Yeah, and your 5, I'm going to guess, is this one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Noah Bolter. Well, I can't. This is an audio format, and I just looked at a list that he'd written and said yes.
Sorry, that's true.
Noah Bolter was everywhere.
He was really good. I just something about that game. What happened to Richmond in the second half until 10 minutes to go when they kicked away again? They just switched off.
Yeah.
Fogarty was getting goals out the back, and
it's a weird one, right? Because I did look at the after the game. I looked at the scores. I was like, Warner and Fogarty did score 3 and 2 respectively, or something like that. And I'm like, I didn't feel like that when I was watching it. Maybe I did zone out when
25 minutes
coming
of
back.
Adelaide,
but
25 minutes of Adelaide, you will see the whole city as well. But I did think he was really good. Obviously, he was my first special mention. I had a question mark next to him, as in, can I squeeze him in? Because he was very, very good. But I didn't get him in this week.
I think I picked Noah Bolter because for a while now, like when Noah Bolter first started playing for Richmond, he was going to be the next Rewell, and then he was going to be the next Rance. And I think since then he has been a bit all over the shop. And this was
more the next Grimes than Rance the way he looked this week.
Oh, for sure.
He looked really good.
I think this was a good game to see his potential again. I'm not saying that he's been terrible.
He is a backman for me.
I think so too. He had 5 tackles as well for a big man, which is pretty good.
He had a really, really good game. I really like Noah Bolter. I love the way he plays football. And it is nice that they've got that break glass in case of emergencies, and he can play forward or in the middle.
Yeah.
And, if they get that rolling, if they get the younger kids in that back line playing more often, then Bolter might have more freedom. But at the moment, he's super important to them, especially with Broad out for 4 weeks now. That's going to be a pretty gaping hole in their back line. He usually takes a player all the way up the ground, the player that Bolter or Grimes doesn't want to follow, into the middle and onto the wings. So it'll be interesting to see how that works.
I think the other really important stat that we've kind of looked over for Noah Bolter and why I gave him my 5, he had the 3rd most metres gained on the ground.
That's incredible.
For a key.
Yeah.
Not just short chipping.
As I was saying, but like Broad plays his game, usually stays back. That's just good kicking.
That's only over 13 disposals.
Coverage. Yeah, it's great.
When you look at Short and Dawson, who had higher, but they had 20 and 27 respectively.
I had Dawson in special mentions as well. He actually was forced to play a defensive role because Richmond were steamrolling them for a lot of that game. And as captain, I thought he really tried to will them back into that game for the bit of time they managed to pull back into it. But we've seen a first half of one game and a third quarter of another game that Adelaide looked really good, and then 5 quarters outside of that where they looked really bad.
Yeah, I still don't know what to feel about Adelaide. Who have they got this week?
Port. Showdown.
Port will want to bounce back on that one.
Yeah. So
that could be ugly. But you never know what's going to happen in a showdown. Let's be real.
Absolutely. I mean, the 2 last year went the opposite ways to what you'd have thought they would. So,
well, you said you didn't have many honourable mentions.
Didn't have a huge amount. I've already run through several of them.
Cool.
Obviously, Dawson, Bolter.
I'm going to run through really quick then.
Go for it.
Sam de Koning. Honourable mention, played really well on Mackay inside 50, kind of let him roam, and he kind of did a swap over with Radaglia, which was part of the problem, because Radaglia couldn't go with Kerno or Mackay for speed. He's also an honourable mention because in tight, he looks really good.
He does.
He just spoils to the wrong area, or will sometimes zone out and his player's 30 metres away.
Sav's spoiling to the corridor tears me apart. I did enjoy him now against Carlton doing his best impression of what Young did the week before with that run back on the goal line as Kerno was about to kick that goal and just smacking it through. I was like, that's what you want to see. That's proper defensive instinct.
I think the potential is there, but boy, it's trial by fire right now for him.
I saw someone say on Twitter this week that we'll probably see a few games this year where Sav looks close to best on ground and some other games where he costs 5 goals.
Yeah. And unfortunately, in the first 2 rounds, he's cost at least 4 per game.
It's been both. But yeah, no, I enjoyed his game. I thought the same about Young. If Young didn't let Cameron take marks on the arc that many times. So how do you stop Cameron, though, I think is
I don't know if anyone will be able to do that this year.
And regarding that, Young ended up taking that mark at the end of the game, which arguably saved it.
Yeah.
That and the spoil from the kid, what's his name?
Hollins.
That spoil was game-changing.
Elite.
From a second gamer.
I think Jacob Wiedering also playing Hawkins. The reason he doesn't get a vote is because Hawkins is so underdone right now.
He clearly looks cooked, but Wiedering still always plays Hawkins well.
Always.
And did it again.
He's one of the few that actually kind of has his number.
If Geelong will have to take neither Hawkins or Cameron to the Gold Coast this week. I wonder if they'll take Hawkins just because they have to.
It'll be interesting.
But we'll see how that goes.
Last two, real quick. Dane Rampy got my 5 last week.
Was good again.
I'm giving him the Hawthorn discount. I can't give you 5 votes for playing against a team
especially
that
when
didn't
you
show
almost
up.
won by 100 points.
Sorry, Dane. No, you'll have to climb a goalpost in anger. And Luke Ryan, I don't know what to think about Luke Ryan. It's junk football.
It is. Like some of them were intercepts, sure, but where did it go again? Like there was a lot of kickouts. There was a lot of.
If you actually look at his
marks.
stats, it really, really shows how. I don't know, stats lie.
Do I want to pick him up in fantasy? Yeah, absolutely. But I couldn't justify giving him a vote this week. It was the same reason I gave Cox the votes in the first week, because
Cox had a much better game, but in the same vein. They ended up playing him forward at the end because they needed to.
That's what I said, obviously, last week. I did want to... we talked earlier about Geelong's midfield looking like the issue. I think that there was an interesting thing, and it's what Freo don't seem to be doing, but I think there's an interesting part of why a good backline is so important in modern football, in the way that teams are forced to play football in the Richmond vein that Carlton now are, Collingwood are. Is that having a strong backline allows your midfielders to play without fear. And Geelong, without that defensive structure, looks so uncertain to take that kick that they were last year, the really dangerous kick, because if they turn it over and they know that there's no Stewart, Henry, Kolodajny back there to be, floating across and reading the play, that they know there's going to be scored against. And they're currently one of the worst teams in the comp for scoring against on turnover, and last year they were the best in the comp.
It doesn't help that they've played two teams that should be pushing top
and teams
four.
that are good at scoring on turnover. So the stats are a bit skewed by that. But
the problem I have watching both of those Geelong games now is that all of the midfielders seem reactionary. They're all drawn into the player, and then the ball gets out.
How long it took to put Bose in the midfield. Who off half back, his kicking was clearly the best field kicking in the team, and he was recruited as a midfielder. I understood they had backline issues, but you can put Guthrie or Blixar's back there. Eventually it was Guthrie, who looked better behind the ball in the end as well. But it felt like that was a really slow reaction to what looked like an obvious change. But obviously I'm not a 2-time premiership coach, so I'll give Scotty the benefit of the doubt on that one, but it was an interesting decision, I thought, to leave that midfield pretty samey for most of that game. And
it's an issue, and in the post game he talked about not putting too much pressure on them, but I feel like that move could have been pulled a little earlier, especially with Guthrie being pretty well blanketed by Curnow.
Yes, absolutely. And again, it's interesting to see how they're going to react this year, and it's always different being the hunted. And Geelong really weren't that last year, and they are now. Like Melbourne last year with a blueprint. Melbourne were the team that everyone knew they had to beat, and Geelong's game plan was so radically different to what it was the year before that teams didn't seem to have an answer, whereas this year, that's not the case. It's a similar game plan with less personnel, and everyone's had to analyse it and watch it because it was the game plan that obviously was dominant last year. And speaking of Melbourne being the hunted, there was a stat released about their win and loss without May before the game.
Hold on. Sorry, I just want to backtrack before we come back to Melbourne. Have we been a bit harsh on Harry Sheasel this week?
Yeah, he was, like I said, he played much more defensive than you think, but it felt like a defensive wing still. But yeah, I did say that. It was much more defensive than Dacos was last year.
It's the 23 pressure acts, the 6 tackles, a couple of 1%ers. I feel bad about it, but I'm sure if he continues to play defense, he'll get some opportunities. But also, if you watch that game, which we did, unfortunately, the whole team was in the back line. Yeah, that's true.
At times of that game, for both teams. Like, there was just... The flooding in that game was horrendous. It was forced by Freo. They were playing that kind of football. But it was hard to watch. My May bit.
Yes, back to Melbourne and May.
Their win-loss, I factored in this game after seeing it. I saw the stat for before the game. And obviously it didn't matter last week because Lever played out of his skin. But they are, since picking him up, 45-24 at 119% with him, winning 65% of games. 6-14 now without him.
Yeah.
At a percentage of 90. He's clearly a massive loss to them. Gorn, I think, was a bigger loss in that game.
I think so too.
They dominated the clearances last week against a good clearance side, and this week the other way around. Grundy just could not get it to Oliver or Viney or Petrarca in that midfield. And yeah, Brisbane were running away with that game. Their midfielders were having a ball. And that was without Dunkley even barely getting near it. Ashcroft looked what we expected him to look in the first round. He was brilliant. So about 10 clearances, 9 clearances, 31 disposals. He was close to best on ground in his second game of footy. It's just crazy how complete a lot of these kids are now when they come into the system. It used to be a shock, but now you just expect...
You just look at Rao's first 3 games, Dykos' season,
Walsh's
season.
You just expect 2 or 3 of the top 5 to come in as ready-made AFL
I feel like
it's
getting better because it used to be 1 or 2 and now it's seemingly more.
You get surprised when they're not.
Tearing it apart up forward.
And I think obviously tools we know are different, but when you get the midfielders, especially the big-bodied midfielders, you just expect them to come in. Holland's game as well. You just expect them to come in and play good footy, and they are. At Hawthorn, obviously McKenzie doing the same thing. He's been close to their best player in a pretty ordinary side. It's just going hard.
So with Melbourne it'll be interesting. Lever obviously did a really good job round 1, so I'm going to back him in to continue that.
Their game against Sydney this week is big. For their season. They don't even have to win it. I think they just have to look competitive because Sydney are looking really good and without Gorn for 4 weeks is huge. But if they win, amazing. Obviously they're back to where we thought they were. But if they lose unconvincingly, it's definitely a worry, I think.
So we just briefly talked about Hawthorn. There's been a bit of uproar this week about Hawthorn and tanking. I
don't think they're tanking in-game. I think that they just don't have the personnel anymore.
I don't think it matters. Is there going to be a big difference between Hawthorn winning 3 extra games this year with, let's say, Mitchell and Shields in the team, or losing those 3 games and playing youngsters, even though it might potentially do a Neild and build a losing culture? I don't see much of a difference.
After round 1, when West Coast lost to North, the outcry was, why are all the old players still on their list? Hawthorn acted early on that. And look, we knew they were going to suffer. We talked about this. You expect that this year. But we also expected Gold Coast and GWS to suck the first few years out in the comp. Like, this is... Whether it's going to work or not remains to be seen.
Yeah.
But they've done it with a reason in mind, and it's not draft picks. Like, the reason isn't to get better picks. It's that they get to play the kids every week and get them AFL level football.
Gel them together.
And see if they can form a team. I think Sicily's a great leader of that side. I think he has good energy to be around a young team. And it's just a shame that obviously they're going to get papered a bit this year.
It's we know what Sam Mitchell's coaching potential is. We saw him in the first 3, 4, 5 rounds last year, and what he can do to sides. He brings...
When they went down to Tassie and beat Brisbane at the end of the year last year, that was a highlight of the season.
He brings a good system to those kids, and that's what they will benefit from. So I know it's just the media overreacting as they always do. It's round 2.
There's not much to talk about in round 2. I think is part of the issue.
You know what they should be talking about? They should be talking about we need to tighten the rules on breaks in games. There should be a defined time limit, regardless of issue.
There's no way that is fair on the team that's that far in front to have all of their players get cold and come back out after 45 minutes with an 8-minute warm-up. That's not...
I think if it's after half-time...
Yeah, and the rule is that it's written off like that after half-time if it's more than a half an hour or an hour at the AFL's discretion. But
I think half an hour needs to be the hard rule because it's ridiculous that we've seen this twice in the past 2 years, and each time the result has almost changed because of it.
Yep, absolutely.
And on top of that, the potential of injury is too high, and there's a weird communication issue, it seems, with the AFL. Melbourne were apparently training 10 minutes earlier, warming up 10 minutes earlier than Brisbane.
Brisbane's home game. There's a lot going on.
And Melbourne came back.
Also, it seems weird that Brisbane would play on that ground for half of this year. Like, if that ends up being the case.
I don't understand the whole Gabba thing.
Yeah, me neither. But yeah, if it is the case that they're only playing on that ground for half of this year, wouldn't you want to play on the ground you might play finals on for the whole year? Like, it seems very weird to me that you'd want to play just 6 to 8 games at your traditional home ground and then have to change home grounds come September, like August and September. But yep, maybe they'll play there the whole year. Maybe that plan will change again because last year I thought they weren't playing there at all this year. So
yeah, that's what I was under the assumption of.
Who knows? All for the Olympics, I guess, which seems to lose every country that hosts it money these days. But that's let's ruin the Gabba for the Olympics.
Well, hopefully we don't get COVID 2.0.
Oh,
all right. I'm just going to talk about MRO stuff.
Yep.
I've
never seen a more cut and dry 4-week suspension than Nathan Broad.
Probably
I
could have
saw
been
it and I went,
more.
probably 4 weeks. And then they went to the tribunal asking for 3, which was obviously them hoping for less. The AFL said if he hadn't gone up and apologised to both coaches, they would have pushed for 5. 4 weeks in the middle, it's 4 weeks.
So the sling tackle is easier for them to punish because it's not a quote-unquote football act, right? I think a bump is uglier.
Yeah, and also Richmond, I understood their argument in the sense that last year Lysett got 4 weeks for a sling tackle, and they said Lysett's was in the corridor, whereas Broad's was on the boundary, and his swing took him over the line.
Yeah,
so
to the harder turf.
Oh, I agree with that. I'm not saying he should have got less than 4 weeks, but I do agree that at least that is something that is a football thought. I want to get ball over line.
True.
And a bump is I want to hurt player. But also, it was a textbook, everything that is wrong with a dump tackle.
Don't get me wrong.
If you drew a picture frame by frame, like storyboard of what it looks like to do a dangerous tackle, Broad completed every step.
I just think that the MRO at this point of the season has dug themselves a hole
Yes.
with the adjudication so far, simply because Buddy's act deserved more than a week.
Ballard
and because of that, Ballard shouldn't get a week. Because those two acts are totally different. And the adjudication system, I think, needs to change. I don't want them to bring back like points or anything like that.
Yeah, it's a strange setup at the moment. One man making all the decisions is weird.
It needs to be a panel.
But yeah, it's just so inconsistent already. It's been 2 weeks in. Then the deconing one was weird. Like because I just don't understand any of
that up.
So
as far as I saw it, the two rucks go up against each other. Potential to jump and get the ball.
Yep.
As far as I can see from the vision, TDK has his eyes on the ball and goes to put his knee up for the contact.
Yep.
Stanley kind of just runs at him and has eyes on DeConing. That one is hard to adjudicate.
What I found weird was that they gave him a week and then said, we should have given him a week. Here's a dossier.
It's strange. They didn't give him a week. They gave him a fine.
That's what I mean. In the end, because they argued down.
So, no. They started with a fine. So they gave him a fine, which I still think should stand.
Yeah.
Because it's clumsy.
Yeah.
I'm fine with the clumsy act being penalised. Get better.
Yeah.
But my issue is, for years and years now, there have been ruckmen in the competition who lead with their knees and injure players and have never been cited.
He's all elbows and knees, isn't he?
I'm talking about your Sean Darcy's. I'm talking about your Braden Pruce's. Obviously, Mumford was one. They go knee up first in almost every contest. And for example, one was Sean Darcy's knee was what caused Pitnet to do his PCL. And none of that is cited. But this one was. This is the first one I've seen where the knee in the ruck contest has been cited. And I feel like a player like Sean Darcy's career might completely change if they start to adjudicate these as suspensions.
Yeah, well, that was interesting about the dossier, right? Like, I'm wondering if this is a flow-on effect, if we've talked about the fact that there's no GM of football currently in the AFL. Is that, did they mean to make it a rule change before the season? Like, how has a dossier now gone out to clubs saying, after round 2, that's an unacceptable
There's
football
been
act?
no rule change, and there's been no precedent before this of calling it not a football
but we're going to
act.
send out a notice to all the clubs after round 2 that it is?
I've seen dozens of ruckmen do it.
Yeah.
Dozens.
We always talk about, I see a ruck free and I go, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't get them. That don't make sense. If you're jumping, you jump with your knee. Like, if I'm jumping,
Yeah.
my knee's coming up because that gives...
So the thing about it is, there are probably 20 ruck frees a game.
Yes. That make no sense.
That make no sense. But none of them have ever been for the knee. You can smash your knee into someone's stomach, won't be a free kick. Won't even be a report. You can bash your knee against them. You can use your knee to, like, push them away. Never been a free kick or a cite or a fine, as far as I know.
Michael Gardner could have played for 20 years if you weren't allowed to bring your knees up. His knees got rattled by the ruck's knees.
And, like, that's what I would like them to stop. And I think part of that, I'm not going to get too far into it, but I think a throw-up instead of a bounce is a good idea.
It's more predictable.
But it seems so strange that something that hasn't been a problem for 10, 15, 20 plus years is suddenly
And not even before the season.
Yeah.
After 2 rounds.
And I'll be very interested to see how it goes going forward because I'm going to be watching players like Darcy. Obviously, I don't think Bruce is playing at the moment. No. But I'll be watching them closely because it'll be interesting to see how many times they do.
Just crashing with a knee.
Yeah.
It's such a strange one. And especially to call mid-season because how do players have time to change the way they've been practicing their ruck work for the entire pre-season?
3+ months.
Weird call.
There are so many ruckmen who are lost to the game for years because of knee injuries.
Yeah.
Who've just been diminished because of it. So I don't disagree with the fact that we should be trying to cut it down. I just think it's strange timing and I don't know.
It's all very odd. I can't really understand it either. I did have there was no Jobisms this week that I noticed, but I did catch Matthew Richardson on Thursday night saying that he knows someone who picked every game right last week, and BT said, except the draw, and he said, no, including the draw.
Oh, yeah?
And BT was like, come on, Richo. Like, he said, no, it's a footy person. He's like, come on, Richo, who is it then? He's like, no, I can't say who it is. Like, I'm not going to... He's like, but they picked every game right. I was like, Richo, mate, like, on it... He's got an uncle who works at Nintendo as well, I think. And who works at Big Ant. You don't, though, do you? Like, you don't have... If you do, they're an idiot. Like, if you've picked a draw, you're insane.
I think there was a good Jobism last year. I think he tried to say originated, but he said originated.
Oh, yeah.
Which made me laugh. I don't know if we ever talked about that one, but that was a good one.
I like that. I want to make a retraction. I said Bevo was the safest of the coaches that you mentioned in round 1. I have now watched 2 Bulldogs games, and I am very unconvinced. They are a mess, and his decision-making on game day seems to be completely at sea. When you've got a 3-time All-Australian contested ball winner in the forward pocket, you've got a 20-year-old who played really well in the back line last year in the forward line.
Dropped this week too.
Who's dropped this week, and Josh Bruce is still on the team, who bought into the club as a key forward, who's now playing a makeshift role in the back line. Because you sent your backman to St Kilda, who you lost to because he played a really good game. Well, not because he played a really good game, but he was a big part of it. I thought Cordy was good for St Kilda. Yeah. I have to wonder what's going on. Like, what is happening in the makeup of that club?
We've always had crazy Bevo, right? He's always chopped and changed. He's probably, over the course of the last 5 years, had the most ins and outs probably.
Well, we said last year they used all but 2 players or something on their list last year.
And it's really interesting that sometimes a swing really pays off.
Yeah.
But I feel like for Bevo, it usually doesn't. And he keeps doing it, and I feel like it does stifle some players because you've got... I'm wondering how long it'll be until we see Lob play centre-half back. Right?
Yeah, and Lob coming back in this week as well, after obviously having a very ordinary game in the first week.
So it's Lob, Norton and Ugle-Hagan up forward.
It's going to be a forward line. Norton, obviously, we know can kick a bag, but I feel like he needs a Paddock to kick a bag. I feel like he's always played his best football when he's been their sole target. And obviously, missing Waitman is huge for them. He kicked a lot of goals for them over the last 2 years.
I think if they rolled with 2 keys up forward and had probably... You can't have Bruce in the back line, can you? I mean, he's been playing okay.
Yeah, but Darcy played so well back there, and now they're like, no, he's a forward now.
So if you have Darcy and Keith, who's your third tall? Gardner? Is Gardner still on the list?
Yeah, I think so.
That shows what we know.
It's a great question.
Ryan Gardner. No. Yes? Yes, sorry.
Jones is obviously the other back.
Jones, there we go.
Of course.
How do we forget that? Yeah, he's a good third tall.
And then there's small defenders. DeRay, Williams, Dale's obviously medium-sized, Richards. Good. Like, they're a genuinely good setup. And this is a team that a few years ago, when they had an undersized backline, were one of the best defensive teams in the comp.
Yep.
And now, with an actual...
I feel like that was due to midfield dominance, though, right?
Yeah. And
which is something they've lost.
The loss of that has been huge for them. But they've looked a rabble the last 2 weeks. They kicked all 5 of their goals in a row, I think, on the weekend. And St Kilda just ran either side of that.
Yep, they carved them up through... They made players who are slow look fast.
So their ball use looks genuinely good. There's excitement at St Kilda.
We'll see how that goes long term.
Yeah, and
they're looking good for now.
They were top 4 going into the bye last year, and they finished 10th. So,
if I was a St Kilda fan, I'd be pretty excited to rock up for the 150th game next week. It should shape up to be pretty fun.
Yeah, I think so. I've got a Daisy Pearce headline watch here.
Oh boy.
Because there was a second club, obviously, banned from the rooms. We've talked about the fact that we get it. It makes sense.
She should just be banned from all of them.
Yeah, I think all media people should. And there's been a lot of articles about that this week, and I agree with it. Your Darcys, your Bartels, all these people who are involved with football clubs and the media are not allowed into change rooms. But yeah, so here's the headline. So SEN ran with, you can't do both jobs. Balm reveals why Tigers barred her from change rooms. Sensible headline. The Age, with a shorter version of that, just says you can't do both jobs. Tiger Balm tells Daisy Pearce. Widewater Sports said, Daisy Pearce banned from Richmond rooms. Neil Balm explains decision after Geelong coaching role.
I know what's coming.
The AFL Chronicle said, AFL powerhouse bans Daisy from change rooms.
The
Daily Mail...
That one is the borderline, right?
Yeah. Oh no, the Daily Mail said, 7 commentator Daisy Pearce banned from Richmond dressing rooms, but not because she's a woman.
I saw one.
Why would it be?
I saw one that said female commentator.
Yeah, I saw that one too. That was the one today.
Yeah.
But not because she's a woman. Thanks, Daily Mail. None of us thought it was.
No one did.
You didn't need to bring that up.
They're not being banned from the change rooms because that's where the men are getting naked or anything like that.
She's a coach.
It's because she's a coach.
And like, not in a small role either. Like, she is an assistant coach on that team's list currently. Like, it's bizarre to me that you would let her in the rooms. Like, we talked about this immediately. So
yeah.
Well done, Daily Mail, for making a pretty standard headline into a weird sexist piece.
Weird. All right, I'm going to wrap up all of my notes with some 22v22s.
Sweet, you got a who would win? Because I've got one this week.
You go first, because I've got 4.
Oh, all right. So we're going to roll out with the who would wins. I just want to jump in before that, before we roll out the podcast with the who would win section, which is a great way to finish.
That's my favourite section.
I've been known to talk about Richmond Collingwood fans harshly, but I think it's been a while since there's been as much excitement about both teams at the same time. And early in a home and away season when it's just all potential.
2018?
Yeah, I think so. But it wasn't until the prelim, which was going to be exciting anyway because it was a prelim. I think that it's just really interesting to see a home and away team where they're both just going. I think it's going to be really fun.
Should be an absolute sellout, right? If it's not.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. It's just another week where the AFL is going to have probably 300,000 plus people at games, which is really cool. I'm excited to watch that. Especially how much those fans hate each other. Yeah. Like, it's going to be loud.
Well, Collingwood fans got into a brawl last week.
With
I
themselves.
wouldn't expect less than 2 this week, so let's see.
All right. Who would win? 2022 Brisbane but coached by Ross Lyon?
Ooh.
Or 2022 Fremantle but coached by Chris Scott?
2022 Fremantle coached by Chris Scott.
I thought so too.
He's a better coach. And
I think Brisbane was some defensive nous with that list.
I can't see Brisbane's midfield applying the type of pressure that is needed from a Ross
Lyon's game.
Yeah, I don't think so. Because Ross Lyon has an ability to make no-name players look good.
Yeah.
Which is a thing he's done since the beginning with St Kilda. He did it at Fremantle as well. Remember how good some days like Tendai Mzungu would look? And he had a string of good taggers as well. I think he applies a lot more pressure than that Brisbane midfield would be used to, and it would take them several seasons to get used to it. Whereas I feel like Chris Scott can adapt a game plan pretty well. We saw that last year.
And Freo has a strong list.
And Freo does have a strong list. They've got a good back six.
Which Chris Scott loves.
Reunited with Jordan Clark, so we'll see if he gets a game.
Well, Scarlett's not there, so it's all right.
And, I think they would do better. Their forward line's worse, but it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, it's fine.
So I'm picking
all right.
Chris Scott's
Geelong's forward line, outside of Tom Hawkins coming of age in the final series in 2011, wasn't fantastic either.
Steve Johnson was there.
Had an old Steve Johnson. Karen Mooney got dropped for James Podsiadly.
Pods had a couple of good seasons in a row.
He dislocated his shoulder a quarter into the grand final.
I'll do a 22 pods. Maybe I'll save that for another week.
22 pods.
All right, mine are all ruckman.
Oh, okay.
Week.
All right.
So the first one's Battle of the West is 22 Dean Coxes versus 22 Aaron Sandilands.
Oh, Cox.
I think it's an easy Cox.
He's such a good footballer.
How many Coxes would get injured?
Oh, true. Yeah. Would they all last the game? Like, would they be running it out with 16? Because if you ran off like a game to injuries rate,
we're talking about knees.
One Cox
Sandilands
would get injured more than every 22 games. So those Coxes aren't all making it through that game.
It's a ticking
football,
time
guaranteed. Yeah.
God forbid they have a half an hour break.
If it was a best of 3, maybe the Sandylancers.
Maybe.
Because they'd be able to keep a full list. But Cox for me, yeah, absolutely.
It's an interesting one, which I think is also an easy answer, which is 22 Dean Jollies versus 22 Todd Goldsteins. Darren Jolly. Why did I fucking write Dean? Dean Cox, I've copy-pasted.
If it was like a whole career sample size, Jolly. If it was 2016, 2015, Goldstein. Like that year he had, outrageous.
I find Darren Jolly an interesting one because even if you look at his stats, he's never been like the top ruckman. But there was a period where his influence on
at
games...
both clubs, Sydney and Collingwood,
was just
he was
insane.
so vital to the way they played football. He played that really good game we like from Nankervis or when Stanley plays well.
Or O'Brien.
Or O'Brien, where he just negates a star ruckman and then has a good game.
Yep. And I think that's what he could potentially do to Goldstein, who I think is better probably forward and defensively.
Yes.
But I feel like Darren Jolly's a real grinder.
Yeah.
He'll grind him down.
And maybe by the end of the game, Jolly's running him out.
Yeah.
I reckon aerobically.
I feel like my answer is Todd Goldstein, but I don't think it's...
Goldstein up by 7 at half time, but Jolly's pegging that back by the end of the game.
All right, this one's relevant. I think the answer is also very obvious, which is 22 Gorns versus 22 Grundys. If we're talking 2018 Grundy, though, does it change?
I just think Grundy around the ground. I'm having, as a ruckman, I think you're picking Gorn every time. But 22?
If I'm having a midfield, I'd rather 8 Grundys over
absolutely.
8 Gorns.
Like just do the Blixards and wait for the right tap to come to you.
So I think that one's closer, but I think on talent I have to give it to Gorn. Right?
Also Gorn up forward. I know Grundy's had a few games where he's kicked bags, but Gorn takes contested marks in the forward line.
That's the issue. I think even though Gorn's had bigger bags, I feel like Grundy's always good for one or
more
two.
Consistent, yeah.
So it's I think that could be a good game too.
Which Gorn is it straight kicking Gorn or like 20 Gorn?
Look, if we're going, I would have to say like 2021, 2022 Gorn and 2018 Grundy.
Yeah, okay, that's fair. Then
grand final year.
I think it's Gorn.
Yeah. And this one's just...
It's outrageous that they're at the same club. That's like...
ridiculous. Imagine having Max Gorn get injured and being like,
you lose the best ruck in the country and then, it's okay, we got the second best, though.
All right, last one's Battle of the Bridge. Is that what they call it in New South Wales?
They did. I don't know if they still do. I think they just call it the Sydney Derby now because they say it wrong.
22 Mumfords and 22 Pruses.
It's Mumford, but no one's leaving that game alive.
How many suspensions are there in that one game?
There'll be a few of them get off for being clumsy. It's going to be interesting because you can't run into Mitch Duncan's head when it's Bruce's head because it's at your head height.
Yeah. He's not low enough.
Yeah, I think Mumford on talent. From what we've seen, like, could Bruce be that good? We don't know. He doesn't play more than 10 games a year.
How old is Braden Bruce now?
He'd have to be mid-20s at least, yeah.
114 kilos. 27.
The big boy. I'm going the Mumfords. Prime Mumford.
Hold on.
But
how tall was Mumford?
204?
199.
Really? Not even 2 metres?
So he's giving up 7 centimetres on Bruce. So Bruce has him in height.
Bruce is probably a bit more of an athlete too.
And as far as weight's concerned, Bruce is heavier.
Yeah, or now. Or like end of career. Start a career?
No, not start a career.
Drafting weight Mumford was massive. I think Mumford, but again, the athleticism of Bruce really makes it a bit different.
Maybe we should make a
simulation.
When AFL 23 comes out. Mumford won't be in the game, unfortunately.
That's a shame.
We'll have to make our own Mumford.
DIY Mumford.
Just feed him hot dogs. We'll be right.
199 centimetres tall, 112 kilos. Low coordination stats, high power stat.
That's fun. Maybe we should do that.
That's probably a good time to leave this week. We've gone lengthy again. And late again, because we keep doing this on a Wednesday instead of a Tuesday.
Things happen.
Which means podcast coming out the day the first game starts. But that's fine.
People
listen
to it in the lead up. That's what I would do if I listened to our podcast, which I don't.
Yeah, I've got an audio corrected, so I hear it. But I'm more excited for this week's footy than I was last week's. I think last week's games were about as exciting as I expected them to be.
I thought
Brisbane Melbourne would be better.
I would like this week to actually have some standout defenders. I feel like I haven't given a vote below 4 that I've felt great about.
I felt good about Andrews 3 this week, but 2 and 1 was tough.
Yeah.
It's been tricky. The first week was good. This week, I'm excited for the showdown. The Derby could just, like you said, it could be the Junk Time Deluxe. I will be there for that game.
Watch the team of the week be McGovern, Barras, Cox, Ryan, and Hayden Young all having 15 marks each, and the game ends up being like 6 goals to 7.
Oh God, I hope not. I'll be in the Eagles Premiership Terrace for the game. I don't know where that is. I've never been there, but that's what my ticket says. So we'll see how that goes, and we'll come back to you next week with hopefully more exciting votes and better games.
Yeah, and hopefully less talk.
No worries. Find us as always, the Back Pocket AU on all socials and YouTube. And we'll see you next week.
Bye.